From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, they're a part of southern landscape.
We've planted about 45,000 trees so far, starting in 2013.
Now efforts are underway to preserve them for generations to come. A new lawsuit against the nation's 4 largest beef packers.
I'm Betsy Gibbon. We're in Hamburg, Iowa, where some of the cleanup is still continuing. We'll have that story ahead of the show.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Planning for many getting delayed even longer now due to snow and now heavy rain. And the rain not ending anytime soon. Let's get an update from meteorologist Cindy Clausen. Cindy, more precipitation for areas that are already saturated.
Yeah, this is a very prolonged system that's going to be bringing a lot of rain. And I can tell you this estimate from the past 24 hours is low. This is a computer estimate, and I can tell you for sure because up here in northern Indiana, we've had definitely more than that half an inch and probably even more than an inch when we get all those measurements in this morning. All right, let's look though at the next 24 hours because we're going to be adding a lot to that, especially in the heart of the Corn Belt, central Corn Belt getting into the eastern Corn Belt. And this is an insane amount of rain that our computer model is projecting in the state of Missouri on into Illinois. So basically Oklahoma all the way up to Michigan, we're looking at the heaviest amounts of rain, and some of these areas are in that 2 to 4 inch range or even higher. So we're looking at some really high amounts. Now, as far as the wind speed forecast, as we head through the day today, we're going to be seeing winds that are going to be increasing, especially in the southern plains as we head through the afternoon and into much of the west as well. Overnight we go and the winds start to pick up around the Great Lakes area, and as we head through your Wednesday, you're still going to see it's going to be right along a frontal boundary from kind of the northeast part of the country down into towards the Four Corners region, and that's where we'll see those highest winds. We'll have a lot more in your forecast on the national level coming up in just a few minutes. Clinton.
Thanks, Cindy. USDA's latest crop progress report showing planting remains behind the 5-year average again this week. Corn planting standing at 15%, the 5-year average 27%. Illinois only 9% planted, usually well above that at 43%. Indiana in at 2%, usually 17%. In Minnesota also 2%, but usually 24%. In Missouri, 45% of corn is planted, but depending on your location, a stretch of good weather helping some show-me state farmers finish corn last week. Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan talking with one producer in Carrollton, Missouri. He says normally he does a 50-50 rotation, but this year, due to flood waters and fertilizer issues, he says it's looking like some of the corn acres are going to have to switch to soybeans, something we're hearing from more producers that they're doing.
We would have put more corn in probably. I can't get real fired up to plant $7 soybeans, so that's that's kind of been a decision factor in here as well. Why we work so hard to get the corn in the ground, but we'll probably end up more 60-40, 60% soybeans now, but we'll still end up pretty close to where we wanted to be.
Soybeans also running behind, 3% now planted. Usually it's about double that. Checking out the winter wheat conditions, 64% of states reporting conditions are good to excellent, much better than last year's 33%. And taking a closer look at the crop, 19% of wheat has headed. That's less than the 5-year average of 29%. Happening right now, wheat industry stakeholders are getting a close-up view at the winter wheat crop. More than 90 people touring the crops in Kansas, southern Nebraska, eastern Colorado, and northern Oklahoma. It's the annual Wheat Quality Council Hard Winter Wheat Tour. Now, if you are on Twitter, you can follow along with the hashtag WheatTour19. And because of the heavy rain and snowfall that delayed harvests in many areas of the country, USDA says it is extending the deadline for producers to certify last year's crop production for payments through the Market Facilitation Program. The new deadline is Friday, May 17th. It was moved from this Wednesday. USDA also updating its 2018 farm income number as $69.2 billion. MFP payments made up a large portion of that $3 billion increase. Some producers have had a few open days to plant, while others have fields underwater. We head to Fremont County, Iowa, one of the hardest hit counties during the recent flooding in March. And as AgDay's Betsy Gibbon reports, not much has changed.
Sandbags remain on the streets of Hamburg, Iowa, debris scattered across the tracks. You know, usually it comes in and it goes out, but this one, it just won't stop.
Flooding still an issue miles away from the Missouri River.
This is the field entrance, and this has been flowing since, March 15th.
As some towns recover from the water, Hamburg remains a farming community in shock.
But as far as all this is concerned, I don't even know where to start.
Many farmers like Michael Stenzel in limbo as acres stay submerged.
This year we would have planted 4,200 acres, and 3,200 of it is underwater.
As they deal with busted bins throughout the county.
The damage is done. Now we got to pick up. We got to pick up, we got to clean up, we got to move on.
Stenzel losing more than half of last year's harvest. Economists say the total loss from the flood in Iowa is hard to calculate.
We've got a lot of estimates that have been made based on how many bushels of storage we think that are out there, but you don't know what's in each one of those bins, and you don't know how full those bins were.
The conversation of busted bins is even occurring in Washington, D.C. Lawmakers have yet to agree on a disaster aid package, and it's one farmers hope will include coverage for busted bins.
It was made clear to me that legislative language would be in the final bill that would update what would be authorized to handle that bin destruction.
Farmers like Stenzel say they don't just want, but need.
Let's just say if I got disaster aid, I would be very, very appreciative, because this could mean the difference between if the Stenzel farming operation continues.
There's going to be a lot of challenges for a lot of those farms. And for some of them, it will be a difficult decision for, do I go back and farm again?
As woes of water linger with farmers in the area.
Water's still coming in from the breach, going south along I-29.
They realize the loss.
We're still sitting here without being able to pay 3/4 of our operating loan from last year.
But those like Stenzel are moving towards the future, but never forgetting the flood of 2019. Reporting in Hamburg, Iowa, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
The nation's 4 largest beef packers are now facing a second lawsuit in as many weeks over accusations of price fixing dating back to 2015. This one brought by attorneys on behalf of consumers. The federal class action lawsuit was filed in Minnesota last week, and according to the suit, Tyson, Cargill, National Beef, and JBS have been bilking consumers since 2015 by artificially limiting the amount of beef that companies purchase, process, and sell to retail operations. Now, the Big Four control roughly 75% of the beef packing market. That's according to the attorneys. And the suit claims packers colluded on their purchases of cattle from ranchers by restricting the number they purchased and depressed the price of the cattle that the defendants purchased through auction, saying that the $100 billion industry reaped billions of dollars in extra profits while consumers paid far more for beef than they should have. President Trump is expressing confidence a new trade deal can be worked out with Japan. President Trump hosting Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe for meetings at the White House over the weekend. Now, the president saying he believes a deal can be struck quickly, perhaps in time to be signed during his visit to Japan next month for the installation of its new emperor.
We'll be discussing that. We'll be discussing very strongly agriculture because, as the Prime Minister knows, Japan puts very massive tariffs on agriculture, our agriculture, going for many years going into Japan, and we want to get rid of those tariffs because we don't tariff their cars. So I think that something will work out.
When we come back, some good news for dairy producers. We'll look at recent price trends and talk about what to expect in the coming months. And an effort to save some unique trees, the painstaking process coming up in the country.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
Corn extending a 3-day rally on Monday. We go to the floor of the CME for an update.
Today in the grain market, let's start with soybeans. It's a little bit mixed and maybe even a little bit lower. Futures did make a new low. It's got everyone kind of, concerned. The bearish sentiment does continue. July hit that new low that equals to how low we were back in September. The market is consolidating, however, and it's not pressing lower where, we're having an all-out collapse, but that's the only good thing to talk about. Corn was a little bit higher today. It started out firm. It did sell off at the end of the day, but it does confirm that there is a short-term bottom. As long as it stays a little bit higher, let's hope that it continues, because it will definitely starting to break through some of the technical resistance numbers. And if that holds, the objective would actually be right around $4. The weather is certainly playing a little bit of havoc on the market, and in the southeast, it's definitely warming up. And so it could be very quickly they can get some of this corn in the ground. That could change things a lot. Live cattle was steady. It seems that the sentiment is a little bit bearish, that sell-off is expected to continue, and beef prices have really taken a little bit of a downturn, and this kind of goes against the seasonal norm right now. The feeders were also easier, but that bad weather has really hurt the grilling season, and it kind of has just brought it to almost a halt.
Brian Doherty and Stuart Peterson, our guest here at the Agribusiness Desk today. Brian, as we talk about, looking for positive things to discuss, one of those would be maybe the chance that milk and dairy prices could be moving slightly higher this year.
Right. The last production report finally showed a little bit of a drawdown. The world dairy trade has had a number of supportive reports in a row. So what it really reflects is that world demand is catching up to cheap prices, and that the supply is beginning to level off. So that's the good story in dairy. You've got a divergence in milk futures prices and grain prices and meal prices. So that gives a little bit of wiggle room there for producers. So take advantage of that opportunity. The dairy industry isn't out of the woods yet. Dairy producers are really good at what they do, and that's produce, and produce a lot. They're effective, they're efficient, and that's what happens when prices are low. Dairy producers try and do what they do best, produce a lot. So we need to take advantage of the rallies until we really see some supply changes. We haven't seen those yet. They'll probably come slowly over time, but we're not seeing enough big supply changes to say, hey, look, do nothing. Now's the time to buy puts, begin forward contracting. You're getting close to $17 for the fourth quarter.
Okay. As we start to look for some of those structural changes, what kinds of things do you think, long term set us up in a new direction?
Yeah, well, corn prices are cheap, and unfortunately when corn is a cheap input, generally you see lots of livestock expansion. You use the grain, you use the corn. We're seeing cattle numbers higher, we're seeing hog numbers higher. Why? Inputs are cheap, it's readily available. Go back to 2012 or 13 or 14, a lot of uncertainty. What happened 2 years later? We saw prices peak in milk and in livestock because of herd reduction. So if grain prices were to make a turnaround, or there's a weather event this summer and all of a sudden that input becomes more expensive, then you start to see the livestock herds move inward, and that's probably the biggest thing dairy hasn't had happen to their input prices for a long time.
Yeah, some structural changes. Well, I appreciate it as always. Thank you for the perspective. We'll be back with more AgDay here in just a minute.
To discuss marketing strategies, call 800-334-9779 or visit stuartpeterson.com.
AgDay, brought to you by Prosaro Fungicide from Bayer.
Welcome back to AgDay. Our meteorologist Cindy Clausen. And Cindy, we went from snowing to mowing to flooding at my house just in a matter of 24 hours.
It has been just all over the place, hasn't it?
It's crazy.
Yeah, well, the big story over the next few days is going to be the rain in the central part of the country. And this whole frontal system, it's going to take a while for this to really move out. Let's put this into motion. Now, as we head through our Tuesday, the real focus is going to be this low in the center here. That's going to very slowly move to the northeast. We'll see a little rain with the first low out in the east, but this is where the bulk of the moisture is going to be around this low that it's going to be affecting a lot of the plain states and into the Midwest as well. We've got the trailing low that's out in the Four Corners region. We're going to see some rain and even some higher elevation snow in parts of the Rockies. Now let's go into Tuesday night and look at how we really increase that moisture. Even a little snow on the northwest side of that as we get into parts of the upper Midwest. Most areas will just be rain though, some thunder possible as well. Through the day on Wednesday, everything progresses to the east. We see more rain popping up now in the south, Texas on up into Arkansas, and then along the front you've got all that rain moving into parts of the northeast as well. But remember, a little bit of snow in the far northern stretches of that. We already showed you the rain. This is the past 24 hours of snow, mainly in those higher elevations. But as you add on the next 24 hours, you're going to see just clipping parts of our very northern reaches, but we're really going to see snow measured in feet here in parts of the higher elevations of the Rockies. Temperature-wise, very warm in much of the southeast. We'll see some cooler temperatures on the back side of that low pressure system. Heading into the overnight hours, we'll see a lot of those low temperatures, very mild in the 50s and 60s in the southeast, more 30s and 40s on the back side of that low, 60s and 70s also in the southern plains. It'll warm up a little bit in parts of the Corn Belt, but it'll start to cool back down again after that front passes through. As we take a quick look at the jet stream, you can see we've got a trough in the western part of the country, so some slightly cooler air there as well. That's where the warmth is, in the southeast. And as we head through Wednesday and even to Thursday, Friday, you'll start to see that trough moving so slowly, but kind of flattening out just a little bit. Over the weekend and into the early part of next week, we see another trough coming into the western parts of the United States. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check out the weather where you live. Kirby, Wyoming, rain and snow showers for you with a high of 46 degrees. Lake City, Iowa, rain likely with some thunder possible as well, high of 51 degrees. And Holly Hill, South Carolina, mostly sunny and hot for you with a high of 89 degrees.
The EU wants to control the names of common foods, but the U.S. Trade Representative's office is weighing in. And later, efforts to protect a national treasure in Louisiana, how they're saving the cypress, coming up.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
A legislative battle is brewing in New York State between farm owners and workers. State lawmakers are considering the so-called Farm Worker Fair Labor Practice Act. The act would eliminate a provision in New York state law that stops agricultural workers from unionizing. It would also extend worker compensation benefits to all types of farms. The plan would also guarantee workers at least 1 day off a week and require employers to pay overtime. Now, farm owners have told lawmakers the act would force them to cut back on employment. Workers argue they're entitled to the same benefits and rights in other industries. A vote has not been scheduled, but could come up for debate before lawmakers adjourn in June. The U.S. has rejected an attempt by the European Union to control the names of several cheeses. The U.S. Trade Representatives rejected policies by the EU to block the ability to use common cheese names such as Fontina, Gorgonzola, Asiago, and Feta. The report from the USTR says the EU policies seek to intentionally put U.S. suppliers at a disadvantage with global markets. The report says the EU pressures trading partners to prevent producers other than those in certain regions of the EU from using certain product names. That's despite the fact that the names are commonly used for products produced around the world. Coming up, efforts to protect a Louisiana favorite, saving the cypress, coming up in the country. In the 1900s, a combination of overlogging and saltwater intrusion decimated cypress forests around Lake Pontchartrain in Louisiana. Now our news gathering partners over at Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation report efforts are underway to replant those forests. As reporter Neil Milanasan tells us, officials are even airdropping tree seeds.
Back when this area was covered in trees, they had to be taken out by hand and boat. Today is no different as we speed through these waters between Lake Maurepas and Lake Pontchartrain, and it's easy to see how replanting this area by hand is anything but easy.
And so Maurepas, where we are right now, is one of the main areas where we're doing this. In Maurepas, we've planted about 45,000 trees so far, starting in 2013.
In 2009, the Mississippi River Gulf outlet was closed. In these last 10 years because of that, this area has now almost become all fresh water. However, the growth has been slow. Coastal scientist Eva Hillman says encouraging growth is important because these trees are vital in protecting homes and farms.
It's a really important area because it provides some protection during storms. for the communities of this area, Ponchatoula, Hammond, Springfield, even into East Baton Rouge.
It's a laborious and time-intensive process, which is why the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation has started a new program with a different way of doing things.
We're trying to restore swamp by just basically throwing seeds out of a plane. The reason we want to do this is because, number one, we could scale up. So we could restore way more acreage each year with using that technique. So for example, this year we did 250 acres. In a general planting season, we might plant 40.
In 2018, this area was air seeded with more than 800,000 seeds. They're hoping for about 5% of them to survive. That would mean about 40,000 trees, not enough to get things back to their original state. But as we looked through this area, we saw signs of hope for a good start. For This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, I'm Neil Melanson.
And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.